John, how many teams did you think at the beginning of the season from the SEC would make the college football playoff?
Five.
Okay.
It's a lot, I know, but that's what I thought. I looked at the schedules. Some of the lesser teams had really favorable schedules. So I could see 5 teams making it.
Okay. So bank on it, brought to you by a commercial bank. 5 won't make it because the SEC is beating up on itself.
Commercial Bank is your neighborhood bank. What makes us different from other banks? We understand that every customer has unique opportunities, challenges, and financial concerns. We don't expect you to fit into the same box as the next person or business. Whether it's purchasing a home, saving for your child's future, or planning for your next vacation, we're with you every step of the way to navigate life's big decisions. Commercial Bank. Life made better.
John, do you still believe it will be 5? And what do you think of the SEC at this point in the season only having one team that's undefeated?
Yeah, I don't think it'll be 5 now. I think it'll be 4. But the thing is, the bad losses that really affect this conference that I didn't see happening in preseason. Of course, upsets always happen, but when you go down a team's schedule in preseason, you check off games: win, loss, toss up. I thought LSU would beat Southern Cal, and now that becomes a bad loss. It impacts the SEC because Southern Cal has lost to the row your boat boys of PJ Fleck at Minnesota. Southern Cal's now got 2 losses. That hurts. Then you go to the Texas A&M game against Notre Dame. A&M played dreadfully offensive in that game. Granted, Notre Dame has a good defense, but Connor Wegman, quarterback, was awful throwing the ball. That was a game A&M need to win, not just for itself, but it really would have helped the SEC. So those are outside the conference. Those are 2 significant losses when you look at the playoff picture. Then you go to the other games: Tennessee losing to Arkansas, Alabama losing to Vanderbilt, and Ole Miss losing to Kentucky. Those were all double-digit favorites. Alabama was practically a prohibitive favorite, 22-23 against Vanderbilt. Tennessee, 13.5, 14. Ole Miss, 17.5 against Kentucky. Those were very costly losses for the SEC.
It's true, Caleb, and they were very costly losses. Let me start with you. Do you still think the SEC can get 5 teams in, or if you had a bet on it, would it be 4 at this point? We know if you bet on it, that'll be incorrect.
Wow, John. It's been a very bad first half of the college football season for me, just like the SEC. Yeah, I would bet on 4 or less, and honestly, it's one of those things where I will say, like, guys, I could say just I have a little more national perspective sometimes. So a lot of times when people get annoyed by the SEC talk, they're wrong. The data shows the SEC is the best conference historically. They load up the NFL. But one of the things that frustrates them, and I see their point this year, and it's the first time I could say it applies this year, is when the SEC, when there are major upsets within the SEC, a lot of SEC fans were like, man, that's just proof the SEC is so tough. They're beating each other up. It's the opposite this time around. It actually makes the SEC look not that good, because Alabama losing to Vanderbilt isn't evidence of Vanderbilt all of a sudden being better this year. It's evidence of Alabama not being that good this year, because Vanderbilt, guys, we're forgetting this, lost to Georgia State. They didn't lose to Georgia. They didn't lose to Georgia Tech. They lost to Georgia State, and then they beat Alabama. And Tennessee lost to Arkansas, who, yes, is 2 plays away from undefeated, but did lose to Oklahoma State. And Oklahoma State's a middle-of-the-pack Big 12 team. We're not talking top 4 in the Big 12 this year. So you're right. You bring up Notre Dame with Texas A&M, who then goes and beats Missouri. And by the way, Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois. You bring up LSU losing to USC, like you said, loses, to PJ Fleck. That's going to be in a segment we're about to talk about soon, because Lincoln Riley cost him that game. But I mean, the SEC it's not that the SEC is beating up on each other because they're all so tough. It looks to the national media like they're beating up on each other because nobody's that good, honestly.
I think so, Caleb. You go back and this was a win, but I watched South Carolina in the season opener against Old Dominion.
I did too.
Very fortunate to win that game. And then it turns around and beats Kentucky by 25 points, and Kentucky upsets Ole Miss. I agree with you. The SEC is not as good as I thought. One thing that helps the SEC, though, you look at the Big Ten, I don't see the Big Ten getting but 3 teams in the playoff. Right now, it looks like Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State.
Oh, my gosh. Well, I'm glad you said that, because if Indiana makes it, it's just awful.
Indiana's undefeated, guys.
I know it's undefeated now, but it is Indiana, and there are tougher games down the road, I would think.
Yeah.
But it's a good team. It's a good team to bet on.
Okay, so let
Indiana.
me ask you guys these teams right now. I'm going to go based off the Athletic, and we had this gentleman on yesterday. His name's Ostermock. He does a great job of laying out the potential bracket. So here's who he has in right now. Alabama. So let me ask you guys this question. If the College Football Playoff Committee television show, which is a television show, if it were on tonight, would Alabama be in?
Yes.
Hey now.
Caleb?
Yeah, they'd be in.
Hey now.
Agreed. Ole Miss, would they be in?
I'm a hard no. I'm a hard no.
No.
John?
No.
That's crazy.
Wow. Okay. I think they would. All right. Georgia.
Dave,
Yes.
when you're saying they're in right now, based on what they've done right now,
Based on what they've done.
Okay, yeah, George would be in now, yes.
Hey now.
All right. Texas.
Hey now.
I think we can all
Of
agree on
course.
that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
All right. Tennessee is the first team out, according to the Athletic. And I think he also factors in strength of schedule moving forward. So if you had to bet right now that Tennessee makes the college football playoff based off what you've seen to this point in the season, John, what would you say?
You remember Jim Morrow's rant on playoffs?
Playoffs.
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 Playoffs. Yeah, but I still like Tennessee's schedule, but it's got to beat Alabama and Georgia now. So I think it's hard to foresee Tennessee making the playoff.
I still have them. I still think they'll make it. But I wouldn't have them in if the season ended today. Dave, you can cry all you want. Indiana would be ahead of Tennessee right now at the college football.
I'm not
playoffs,
crying. No, I know.
I know you hate Indiana, but
no, they wouldn't be at this point. My point is, it's fun to talk about right now, but they're not going to be in.
No,
I don't think they're in now, but I do. I guess I'm waffling on the question, but I still think Tennessee can make the playoff. I don't like Georgia's chances of making the playoff. Right now it's in, but for what I've seen of Georgia, I don't think it wins at Texas, and then it's still got to play Tennessee and Ole Miss.
True. Okay, so are you saying only 4 make it? And by the way, the poll question is on our YouTube page. Would you bet Balls could make the? I'm going to change that. Go ahead. How many teams do you think get in? John, let me ask you this.
I think 4 get in, but then when I start looking at what teams I think will get in, I don't have 4. I mean, Alabama and Texas certainly, but then I'm unsure about everybody else. Could Georgia get in at 9-3?
The one thing I'll say in the SEC's defense, as we're saying all this, and I think they could, is that the SEC has traveled to play more marquee games than the Big Ten has this year. Now, the Big Ten plays 9 conference games versus the SEC's 8, but Ohio State played the worst out-of-conference schedule in the history of out-of-conference schedules. I mean, that was a terrible out-of-conference schedule. And the same applies to Indiana. Whatever you want to say about Michigan, they have 2 losses, but, I mean, at least Michigan played Texas. So I think that could help the SEC.
Yeah, but the Michigan is not that good. I think a problem for the SEC right now is Notre Dame. I don't see how you can put in a team that's not in a conference and lost to Northern Illinois. I just don't. But that win over Texas A&M at Kyle Field looms large for Notre Dame. If it can win out, and see, I didn't think early in the year, I didn't think it would beat Southern Cal at the end of the year, but now what I've seen of Southern Cal, yeah, it's very beatable. So that could work against the SEC.
Yep. Lincoln
and-
Riley's done a fantastic job of making himself an NFL hire. That's about all he's done. I mean, because the NFL, I think, wants these guys that can throw it around and don't play defense.
Well, I mean,
actually
how
have
well
to-
is it throwing it around right now?
Really not. It's really not.